Hello, my name is Sebastian and I'm going to speak about release, and it's based upon Tjajandra's literature. So what is a release? A release is an authorized and tested change to the IT infrastructure or service. A set of new files that upgrade an antivirus program from version 1 to version 2 can be called a release. Even if a technology-censored person were to view it as a bunch of files being copied to the server, it is a release because the change management team has approved of copying the files to the specific file server. And according to the ITIL framework, the definition of a release is one or more changes to an IT service that are built, tested, and deployed together. A single release may include changes to hardware, software, documentation, processes, and other components. But what is release management? Release management is part of the service transition phase of the ITSM core lifecycle. Any modern IT infrastructure will consist of hardware, software, configuration settings, and operational methodologies. There could be several interdependencies that could cripple the entire network if not properly managed. Applying a software patch on a server without properly evaluating in a separate test environment or without knowing how to roll back may cause the server to go haywire if the patch has a bug. Change management ensures that no changes are made to the IT infrastructure or services without going through the necessary approvals. The release management team is responsible for the release and distribution of the software into the live environment. Coordinating the implementation and for secure storage of authorized IT equipment and software. The ITIL definition of a release management is the process responsible for planning, scheduling, and controlling the movement of releases to test and live environments. The primary objective of release management is to ensure that the integrity of the live environment is protected and that the correct components are released. Release management is part of the release and deployment management process. But what is a deployment? The ITIL definition of deployment is the activity responsible for movement of new or changed hardware, software, documentation, process, etc. to the live environment. Deployment is part of the release and deployment management process as well. But what is the release and deployment management? This is a process that is called R&D, which is responsible for both release and management and deployment. The R&D is part of the service transition phase of the core lifecycle. The ITIL definition of the release and deployment process, the process responsible for planning, scheduling, and controlling the build, test, and deployment of releases, and for delivering new functionality required by the business, while protecting the integrity of existing services. So why should there be an R&D management team? And that is because a modern IT infrastructure may consist of hundreds of machines and dozens of software programs and network equipment. All these will have to work properly for the business to run its operations. A release management team ensures the safety while installing updates and upgrades. For example, the CAB may have been approved the upgrade of an email server from version A to version B. However, it is the release management's responsibility to create a set of files that will do the upgrade. They will also ensure that they have a mechanism to roll the server back to version A if something goes wrong with the upgrade. It is absolutely necessary to have an orderly and controlled method of implementing changes to the IT infrastructure, and this is where the release management team will help. And I have noted some common issues with release management according to ADDI. And the first one here is the lack of visibility of all changes that are planned or ongoing within the environment, insufficient or inaccurate detail regarding change tasks, which make identifying potential synergies difficult, unclear lines of reporting and undefined seniority hierarchies between projects and project leaders, poor release process definition, and unclear process scope, poor packaging, incomplete instructions, untried methodologies, missing files, elements of the release package, and lastly, design modifications being applied as the changes leave the door, and more. And that was my quick introduction to release. Thank you for listening.